Hey, everybody. This is Mike Miller, and welcome to the Go Carolinas podcast. Today on the show, I have a very special guest, Mr. Claude Schmid. Claude and I have known each other for probably close to 30 years now, if not more. We used to be in the Spartanburg JCs together. And Claude is the founder of a really fine organization called Veterans Last Patrol, which provides services to veterans that are approaching the end of life. And wanted to talk to him a little bit about that today and how he founded the organization and what they do. So, Claude, thanks so much for joining me today.
Mike, thanks. Good to be with you.
All right. Uh, I've known you for years, but not necessarily everybody listening has. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I know you were in the military. Tell us a little bit about your military service and your business background.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, for the opportunity. As you mentioned, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I can remember we actually took a camping trip up on the top of one of those mountains in Pisgah for New Year's one time, and we spent a cold overnight trip there.
I remember it was quite cold, and I think all you ate was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or something.
Whatever it takes to get us through the night. But thanks for your question. I grew up in New Jersey, and then when I was a young man, my family moved to South Carolina. So I'm a Spartanburg guy for a number of years. I went to Dorman High School, went to Wofford College, and then I got commissioned in the Army, went overseas for a number of years, and ended up serving a total of 31 years in the Army with a lot of opportunities to serve our nation in different parts of the world. I came back here for a period of time, got into business, and still I'm operating a small business. But on the last patrol side, we can go into that story of how it started and what we're doing. But it's all primarily about giving back to veterans, and I can go into any details that you want me to talk about.
Yeah, tell us how the whole idea came about. First of all, to start that organization.
Yeah, that's a good question. People ask that a lot. So basically, my last assignment on active duty, I was the chief of the Wounded Warrior Flight Evacuation Program, which was the Department of Defense operation that brought our casualties back from overseas. This was during the pretty heavy time of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So we were evacuating hundreds of veterans and military personnel each week. And I had that job to kind of run that organization. And during that, I met thousands of our nation's wounded and many of their families. And I was always speaking to them about why they joined the military and why they served and what had happened to them in action and how they got hurt. And in the course of all that, I learned pretty rapidly that the single thing outside of the medical care that a wounded soldier, airman, Marine would need is friendship. They want somebody to talk to, some companionship, and they'd like to share their stories. So as I was getting out of the military and I was thinking about how to continue to give back to the veterans community, I started asking myself, well, what about what's happening to veterans in end of life care? Where do they go? Who looks after them? And what's that program about? And so I got into volunteering for hospice cases for veterans. This was in New Jersey at the time. And pretty rapidly, I learned that there was a hole in the system and that there's just so many lonely veterans that are in care facilities around the nation, hospice care, nursing homes, and they just need companionship, somebody to talk to. So I decided to try to do something about that and draw attention to that on a more national level. So we founded the nonprofit here in South Carolina, late 2019. And our mission is threefold: is to provide those friendships, honors, and support to veterans that are on their last patrol.
Okay, so late 2019. So you hadn't been in business too long before COVID hit and kind of probably
Yeah,
negatively
COVID.
affected things.
Yes, absolutely. COVID had a big impact. A lot of these programs around the country were shut down. Many families that may have had a loved one in a facility during that period knew the complications, and oftentimes visits could not be made at all, even by family members. So we tried to be adaptive and do what we could to support in different ways. We started several card campaigns, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, how to write to veterans that are on their last patrol. We did some video presentations, we did calls, and we did continue to do some of our ceremonies. They would oftentimes be outside of the window or maybe outside the door of the facility because we couldn't go inside. But fortunately, COVID is much less of an issue now, and these programs are rapidly picking back up steam anywhere in the nation.
Okay, and you're using the term "we" early on. Who all was working with you there? Did you have volunteers or?
Yes, we have, we're almost 100% a volunteer organization. We have now volunteers in 27 states around the country. We started out, however, here in the upstate of South Carolina. So this is our strongest location. We've got dozens of volunteers here in the area, but we need more because there's so many situations out there in the communities where somebody just needs companionship. And especially if you're a veteran or a friend of veterans or have veterans in your family and you feel like giving back to the veterans community is something you want to do, reach out to us. Veteranlastpatrol.org is our website. And but we're primarily a volunteer organization, and we like that idea of promoting volunteerism among our fellow veterans and friends of veterans.
So how did you get started as far as deciding where to go? And obviously there's thousands of care facilities around the country. Did you just start calling these facilities, or what was the process there?
Yeah, actually, this was in New Jersey when I first started volunteering. So the process was I approached a hospice care provider, and these are these companies and organizations and communities around the country. And I asked them, well, what happens to veterans and can I help? And so they hooked me up with a veteran patient, and I visited that individual once a week or so for several months until the person passed away. And then when I came back to Spartanburg towards a few years ago, I decided to do something similar here. So I went and signed up for a hospice care provider in the local area, and they started assigning me veteran patients. And I said, look, this is something more veterans should do. Let me see if I can expand it. And so we decided to start this nonprofit for the purpose of bringing friendships and honors and support to veterans that are on their last patrol.
So what did it become an official nonprofit in 2019 or?
Yes, we founded the organization. We are a 501(c) nonprofit, and we did that to help get the word and get official. And so we seek assistance wherever people are that want to get involved. We've got a website, as I mentioned, veteranlastpatrol.org. We're pretty active on social media. We post a lot of stories and do events in the upstate. I think you've been to some of them. And that's just a great way for folks to continue to give back to those that have served their nation in uniform.
Okay. And you've actually got, several full-time employees now or?
We have actually only one full-time employee, and we've had some part-time help, but most of our work is volunteer-based. People just want to give a few hours a week and help us out. Yesterday, for instance, we sent 3 people out to Rock Hill and did a ceremony out there for a veteran that's in hospice care. And when I say ceremonies, it means we get a bunch of veterans together. We'll visit the home or we'll visit the facility, and we'll make a presentation. We'll give them some patriotic gifts, a flag, a quilt, and packets of cards that people have written that just want to say thank you one more time to those that have served.
Yeah, and that's a very moving thing to watch. See these guys tear up and get to recognize that they've been honored for something they did so long ago.
Yeah. That's a good. What we find, Mike, is that a lot of times, even if someone has served 30, 40 years ago and pretty much didn't even continue so much their association with the military community or fellow veterans, when they go into end-of-life care, a lot of times they will think back on their life and what was important for their experiences, where they remember really contributing something that was meaningful, and many of them will remember their military time and want to talk about it. So even if they didn't talk about it much during their lives, when they get into end-of-life care, they like to share their story, and maybe they recognize that that's perhaps their last time to share their stories. So we find them a little bit more open and talkative many times when they're close to death.
Yeah, and when you're talking about veterans, the obviously the World War II generation is almost gone.
Yeah,
There's I guess anybody that would have served even at the very end of World War II at a young age is approaching 100 years old now.
Yes,
So,
yes. They're few and far between. They're still out there. We find one of them. We try to really do something special for them. We've honored a number in different parts of the country. I think you remember just a couple weeks ago, we did a special event in Greenville, and there we honored a World War II veteran. And those guys are so special that when you find one, you really want to recognize them in a unique way.
yeah, and of course, the Korean War was only 5 years to 8 years after that. So those guys there's not as many of them around still. And it's weird. Being our age, or I'm a few years older than you, I think, not too many, but you think of Vietnam.
You look a lot younger though, so I don't think you're older.
Vietnam was something that happened in our lifetime, but the guys that served in Vietnam are starting to get on up there in age too.
Vietnam veterans are a big portion of our service group now. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going up to Washington, D.C., and we have an information booth on the Washington Mall for the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And there's a special event taking place in Washington, D.C., and ourselves and I think about 70 other veterans groups are going to be there for that, just to spread the word and support the Vietnam veterans and the special experiences they had in war.
Do you have any individual stories you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, I've got a lot of stories. It's just amazing the experiences and connection you make with these veterans. I remember one of my earliest cases. He was a Navy veteran from World War II. He had been a landing craft operator and would he participated in D-Day. So he was operating a landing craft during the invasion of Normandy in 1944. And basically, on one mission, when they were taking their landing craft into the beach, the adjacent boat to him and his boat as well, but the adjacent boat in particular got shot up. The crew went into the water, and one of his fellow seamen were wounded. So he dove in and rescued this other fellow and pulled him out into the boat. And what he told me many years later when I was visiting him in hospice care, he said that guy he rescued sent him a box of cigars on the anniversary of Normandy invasion every year for something like 45 years. And that just established a tremendous bond. This gentleman was all alone. He lived in a small apartment. He had a caregiver that came by to see him a few hours every day. But other than that, he was alone. And so I would go in there and see him, and he'd be sitting on the couch. He was pretty disabled by that point, and had a TV in front of him. He watched a lot of TV. And over to the left was an urn, and in that urn was his wife remains. Says he lost his wife like 6 months before I had met him. So he was all alone. And we would just talk, and he'd share stories, and we'd talk current events, and we'd talk history. It's amazing how much you can learn from these people that lived in the generation, before ours, and how they lived their lives. And so we shared insights and lessons of life. And every time I would leave, I would tell him, you have a good week. And he would always reply back to me, you have a better one. And he'd point at me as I was walking out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing you hear a lot from World War II and other veterans is they, kind of get home and they sort of don't want to talk about it, because
they a lot of times don't. In those days they were encouraged to keep things inside, and people weren't as open in their experiences and feelings. But as I said a moment ago, what we find in end of life care is a lot of times people will talk us, and sometimes it's most interesting to go talk to a new person, a new friend, maybe the volunteer that's visiting, because the dying veteran was, thinks inside of himself, look, this is my last chance to share maybe some of my experiences in life and what I learned to this younger person who's visiting me. And yeah, I didn't talk about it, but maybe I should now, because I'm really thinking about those days. And one way to pass it on is to talk about it.
Yeah, I know my wife's dad was in the 82nd Airborne in World War II. And he passed away about 10 years ago. But just he never mentioned anything, at least not when I was around. But
Yeah, that was kind of the way in those days. But and people are different. People are different, but sometimes they will open up and share. And it's not necessarily sharing war experiences. It's just talking about life. I remember another gentleman who he grew up in Philadelphia, and he talked a lot about life on the streets in Philadelphia as a young boy back in the 20s and 30s. And he described a scene that somehow stuck in his because this was close to Camden, New Jersey, where the big Campbell soup factory was. And he just described as how a certain day a week, the farmers from New Jersey, South Jersey, and elsewhere would come in by wagon with wagons filled with tomatoes in the back, open wagons piled with tomatoes. And they were on the way to the Campbell soup factory. So these farmers would deliver their produce to the Campbell soup factory where they'd make that famous Campbell's tomato soup. And he just remembered that and would talk to me about little life episodes like that.
Okay. Yeah, we did a couple of interviews last year with a couple of local guys here in Spartanburg, Mr. Green and Mr. Justice. And
yes,
for anybody listening, we can post the links to those on the YouTube channel. But those guys were really interesting to hear from. In fact,
yes.
Mr. Justice was at your dinner a couple of weeks ago.
Mr. Justice, well, Mr. Green and Mr. Justice are both still with us here in Spartanburg. Mr. Justice is known for still being able to wear his CB uniform all these years later. He was the dozer operator on Okinawa during World War II, and Mr. Green was a Marine on Iwo Jima. And both amazing guys. And yeah, there's a YouTube video of the interview we did of them about a year ago.
Okay. So as far as the programs, I know another one of the things you guys do is Christmas cards. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that works and how that comes together?
Absolutely. Well, we have 2 card programs, and this is something anybody around the country can help with at any time, children as well as adults. And what we have is what we call cards of gratitude. So anybody that wants to reach out and thank a veteran that's in hospice one more time for their service, we accept from the public cards of gratitude all year. And you just write a little note in there, and then we'll get it delivered out to a veteran somewhere in the country that's going into end of life care. And then we have at the end of each year, we have something called Operation Holiday Salute. That's our national campaign for Christmas and holiday cards. We get those from all over the country as well. Last year, we had a target of 60,000 cards, and we raised that. And this year, our target is going to be 65,000 cards. And so those cards go into individual packets, and each veteran that we visit will get a packet of cards that has about half a dozen cards inside. And so if you know of churches or schools or anybody like that might want to be involved in a holiday campaign like that to bring a little cheer to veterans' life that's going on his last patrol, please reach out to us.
How do you get the schools involved in that? Do you just reach out to the schools, or just people that find out about it and contact you?
It's mostly word of mouth and social media. You see postings about this on our social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. And adults that hear about this program and maybe have children in school, they'll help circulate the word. Some schools already know us now after doing this for a few years, but word just gets spread. And but we need a whole lot of cards this year. So if you know somebody that might want to help with that, please reach out to us.
Okay. And as far as just general volunteering, if somebody wants to volunteer, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys?
What they should do is visit our website, veteranlastpatrol.org. And there's a little contact tab there. So if you go into that contact tab, you put in a little bit of personal information, who you are, where you are, and then we'll reach out to you. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about volunteer opportunities and what you can do. You can also just call us. Your program here is local, so you can just reach us on the phone. 864-580-8005 is our Veteran Last Patrol office number. But we've got a lot of events where we go and visit veterans as a group for these ceremonies I mentioned, and individual visits. So if you feel a calling and wanting to help somehow, please reach out to us in one of those ways.
And a couple of weeks ago, you had your annual fundraising dinner, which I was able to attend. tell us about that and how that came about, and just some of the folks that were there for that.
Yeah, we have three major events every year. One is the Operation Holiday Salute that I mentioned a moment ago, the Holiday Card Campaign. Another one is this dinner. So we do an annual dinner. This year it was in the Greer, South Carolina. We had about 150 attendees, and they came to help us spread the word and talk about our mission. We did an auction there, a silent auction. We had a couple of guest speakers, including Major General James Livingston, who's a South Carolina Medal of Honor recipient out of Charleston. He came up and made the keynote remarks for the event. But it's a way to thank our volunteers for serving, and also to raise awareness within the community of what we're trying to do for these veterans.
Yeah, I have to say you did two honor ceremonies at the event, and the African American gentleman, the former sailor. I was just thinking his life. He would have grown up under discrimination and segregation, and
Yeah.
And he was still willing to serve and come back to a country where he still was not fully honored after the war. But even after that, he was proud of his service, and seemed very very happy to be honored there.
Yeah, he was very thrilled about it, and I think he even made a comment that despite the discrimination that he faced, he drove on and did his mission, and got done what he felt needed to be done. And so we, anybody who served our nation, we want to recognize them.
Okay. All right, Claude, I don't want to take up too much of your time today. I hope people listening will find this interesting and be willing to help you out. And it's veteranlastpatrol.org. It's a little confusing. There's no S in there. It's Veteran Last Patrol, not Veterans Last Patrol, right?
On the webpage, veteranlastpatrol.org.
Okay. All right, Claude, thanks so much for being with me today.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Have a good day.